Hello, everyone. Welcome to Opinions New by Dr. Frank Tianshi. I'm Frank. In this episode, I want to talk about the transatlantic trade alliance to corner communist China. Okay, this is how the story goes. Right? Let's start with the Chinese, why Chinese gave up their fight at the WTO. Right? In 2001, China was accessed into WTO, World Trade Organization, and and then back then China made a lot of promises, and also China was given 15 years to reform, to open up the market, allow for Western companies to come into China with their direct investment, and also ease to reduce government intervention to the China economic life. Okay? And then after that, only after that, after 15 years period, China will be granted the market economy status, MES, market economy status. Okay? And the thing is, 15 years from 2001, that's in 2016. So, and by 2000, December 11th of 2016, right, time is up, right? And China is supposedly be given the MES, market economy status, but China was not given that. Back then, the US government and also European government disagreed to refuse to acknowledge or recognize China as market economy. I have written articles about this, that is almost 4 years ago, 4 years ago. Okay? China was denied of their market economy status, even after 15 years of a grace period. Right? And then, of course, China disagreed with that, the ruling, and China actually appealed to the body, governing body in WTO on March 9, 2017. Okay? And then there's a panel, the judge panel on that actually included countries like 20 countries, including Taiwan, India, and Saudi Arabia. Interesting combination. And then why is that the market economy status so important? Okay? Why does China seek so desperately to be recognized as market economy? So why is that so important? This has something to do with dumping or anti-dumping practice. Okay, let me give an example. Let's say we have iron and steel manufacturers in the United States, in the US, right? And we also import iron and steel from Brazil and from China. Right? Sometimes in international business or trade, some companies may be accused of, or they may be practicing what we call dumping, a practice of selling, extensively a certain product in the market, under its cost, under market price, or even under its cost. Of course, why would the companies, international companies, sell their products under its cost? It's losing money, right? Well, after all, they're not that stupid. They're not silly. They are selling that under cost in order to drive out their competitors. So, for example, the Brazilian or Chinese steel manufacturers may want to sell cheaply in the U.S. market to drive out the U.S. Competitor. So the U.S. steel manufacturers could not compete with cheap imports from China. They'll have to shut down. Once they shut down their business, stop their operations, and then the foreign manufacturers will become the dominant player or dominant provider of steel to U.S. market. They can raise the price again, to whatever they want. So that's dumping, right? Of course, there are laws governing the dumping, the practice of dumping, anti-dumping practices. So U.S. companies, U.S. steel manufacturers could appeal to the U.S. Government and then to through U.S. government to WTO, World Trade Organization, appeal for this accused manufacturers in China or Brazil for dumping, right? And then the issue comes, how do you determine the cost, right? What is the market price? What is considered below market price for a certain product like iron and steel, right? Because in different countries, there are different prices, right? There are different costs of living, cost of production, there are different price levels. China, for example, has been known as the world factory, and Chinese products are believed are known to be cheap and often of poor quality, but it's cheap, right? And cheaper. It's cheaper because the Chinese labor is supposed to be cheaper. Well, also in China, that's a different issue, though. I have written a book called "The Dragon's Vault," talking about Chinese business economy. And we know that Chinese product is cheap because the government actually took much of the profit from that. They took advantage of the laborers in China, the workers in China, often the peasant workers from the countryside. They paid them very minimal, right? And they also disregard the environmental pollution, environmental issues, and they cut corners, to make product cheap. So in the Chinese price, the cost of making anything in China is cheaper, is lower than that in other countries. Right? If China was indeed a market economy, and investigators from WTO could go to China and look at, examine the market price, the market price and market level, of anything, any product. But China is not market economy, right? The government intervenes. In fact, government controls much of the major industries like steel and iron and steel. In fact, the Chinese Communist government has tight control of the major, most profitable, most important industries, sectors in China, from banking, securities, telecom, energy, telecommunications, you name it, right? And the iron and steel, right? So with government control and government subsidies, the price is actually, you can say, is now real, is now true cost. In that case, since China is not a market economy and the price is twisted, and price level is twisted, so the WTO, the judge panels, they'll have to seek a third party, a third country, to compare the price in that country. They'll choose a country like third country that is similar in this economic development and everything, with China, similar to China, and find a price level of steel, a fair market price of steel in that country, and use that as the basis for its comparison. If that's the case, China is always on the losing side because it is indeed China price is lower than that, and then China will be accused of dumping, and then the U.S. government can impose an anti-dumping tax on Chinese imports, Chinese steel, iron steel imported into the United States. So with that levied additional levied taxes or tariffs, punitive tariffs for dumping, the Chinese product will not be competitive, and then that will help save U.S. manufacturers. And that is why the Chinese government is so desperate in seeking and trying to get this market economy, status, or MES. Okay? And that's why China started the fight in March of 2017. Now, after 4 years, now what happened? In 2019, last year, the WTO ruled, on temporary basis that China lost. Okay, in other words, WTO, the 20-country panel rejected the Chinese claim that it is a market economy. Now, even though the WTO made the ruling is not final, China still has a chance to appeal to that decision. And the final date of that appeal to the decision by China to WTO is, guess what? June 15, a few days ago of 2020. Okay? But now the deadline of June 15 just passed. China did not appeal for the decision. If you don't appeal, that means you accept the ruling. Then basically China gives up its fight for the market economy status. Right? Now, why does China do that? Why does China give up its fight for this market economy? I think there's several reasons for that. For one, well, of course, we all know that China is not a market economy. It's a mixed economy. There are certain sectors, maybe the government-led the domestic or private companies to compete with each other. Right? In the major sectors, main sectors of economy, the government is a tight control of everything, from price to input to output to management, the operation of the corporations, state-owned enterprises or SOEs. In that case, if it's not a market economy, and then I think China knows for sure that they probably don't have much of a chance of winning that case, even if they do appeal, right? And secondly, I think another reason is that back when China was making the decision to appeal, that was in 2016, right? That was before Trump came into office and became the president of the United States. Right? I think China was hoping, they were hoping that Democrat like Hillary Clinton would become U.S. president. The U.S. government would be just like before, be very nice and cordial and tolerant, to Chinese aggression and let them go. Right? But we had Trump. I'm glad we have Trump, right? I hope that we will have Trump for the next 4 years, right? With Trump administration's America First, American priority policy, U.S. has launched a trade war against China. We have known that, right? We all know that story. We know how it goes, right? How it went. And we also know there is a phase one deal that reached between U.S. and China last year. But the execution of the phase one deal doesn't seem to be very smooth, right? And in my other articles, I believe that the phase one deal could end up in vain or could be in jeopardy. Okay? And now the phase two deal is supposed to be underway, but that is also, of course, uncertain given the situation about phase one. I believe the Chinese government, Communist government, knows for sure what exactly is going on, right? And they know they don't have much chance of winning the appeal. And even if they win the appeal, and U.S. is not going to give them the preferential treatment because of trade war, because of the tariffs the Trump government has been fighting with Chinese. So that's why they give up. I think that's why they gave up. They found no hope. Okay? Now, the things are getting more and more interesting now. Right? The U.S., I believe, is fighting, and asking cooperation from European Union, right? And it was not that successful in the past couple of years, 3 years. We know the relationship between European leaders and President Trump. I would say it's less than cordial. Let's put it that way. Okay? And now the government, the U.S. government, is actually trying hard to do that. I found out something quite interesting. What the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in Copenhagen. There is the Democracy Forum. He said something. right? He actually asked the European countries to choose side between US and China, clearly. He said that also US sanctions on Chinese government officials are ready to go. And also there is a good chance the US will cut its economic ties with China. And President Trump also said something like there is a possibility of decoupling between US and China. I think European countries, European leaders have heard about that. And now I think they realize Chinese communist regime is a threat, not to just America, but to Europe as well. Yeah. In addition to the pandemic, but also in economic warfare. Yeah. Now, with this Chinese abundance of its fight for the market economy status in WTO, what is happening here is right away, the European government, European unions have put down a warning and warning that the Chinese manufacturers, even if the manufactured goods were made in another party by another company by a subsidiary of Chinese SOEs in the foreign countries, they're still subject to additional tariff if the company or parent company receives subsidies from Chinese government. Now, the EU is joining the United States in the fight towards injustice in world trade and economy at this time. Okay, I believe there is a transatlantic, alliance or cooperation to fight the Chinese communists and to corner the Chinese communists. I think it's going on right now. Okay, that's all I have for today's episode of Opinions by Dr. Frank Tianshi. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.